Alright, hello everyone. I hope you guys are doing good. So today I'll be discussing the solutions to Codeforces round 754, and this was a division 2 round held earlier today. And talking about the difficulty level, I would say this round was just beautiful. Every problem, the position of every problem was just what it should be. It was totally justified. And just like almost all the previous rounds conducted by Ashish Gupta, this was yet another piece of art. And especially problem D was like really good. And I will be discussing the first four problems today. So let's start with the first problem. Right, so in this problem we have been given with three numbers a1, a2 and a3, and in one operation we can choose two out of these three numbers and basically increment one of them and decrement the other. And finally what we want to achieve is that the value of their arithmetic mean is the value of the arithmetic mean of a1 and a3 should be as close as possible to a2, which means formally speaking I have to minimize the absolute value of a1 plus a3 minus twice of a2. Yeah, so this is what I have to do. And again, even though this is a div 2a problem, it is not very intuitive, but I mean the solution here is really good to know, and it will be fun. So let's start. So here we have three numbers a1, a2 and a3, and without any loss of generality, let's assume that this is the scenario. a1 is less than equals to a2, which is less than equals to a3. So what I can say is, let's say a1 is something here, a2 is something here, and a3 is something here. Right, so basically I can say that d1 can be the absolute value of the difference of a1 and a2, which is a2 minus a1, and d2 is equals to a3 minus a2. Great. So what I want to do is I want to bring these values of d1 and d2 as close as possible, right? Essentially what I want is that ideally in an ideal situation d1 and d2 should be same. If that is the case, then their arithmetic mean will just be a2. The arithmetic mean of a1 and a3 will just be a2, right? So finally I want to bring d1 and d2 as close as possible to each other, where this particular value is d1, this distance between a1 and a2 is d1, and the distance between a2 and a3 is d2. And what is happening is in one step I can choose two of these numbers. So finally, obviously I will have two cases. One is the case where I will choose a2, and other is the case where I will choose a1 and a3. And first of all, I should say that choosing a1 and a3 is just useless. It's just plain useless, because if you choose a1 and a3, then let's say you are decrementing a1 and incrementing a3, you will get a1 minus 1, a2 and a3 plus 1, but the value of a1 plus a3 minus twice of a2 is just the same, right? Because a1 is decremented by 1 and a3 is incremented by 1. So if you are choosing a1 and a3, then it is useless. So obviously you are going to choose a2. Now let's say we choose a2 and a1. So if you choose a1 and a2, and let's say you increment a2 and decrement a1, then you will be left with something like this: a1 minus 1, a2 plus 1 and a3. Well, what this means is that now d1, which is the difference between a2 and a1, is the previous d1. So new d1 is equals to previous d1 plus 2, because a2 has been incremented by 1 and a1 has been decremented by 1. Similarly, I can say that new d2 is equals to previous d2 minus 1, because now it is a3 minus a2 minus 1. So what happened here is that d1 increased by 1 and d1 increased by 2 and d2 decreased by 1. And essentially what happened is the distance between d1 and d2 it decreased by 3, because d1 is increasing and d2 is decreasing. So essentially the distance between d1 and d2, that decreased by 3, right? And you can try and work out all the cases. This is just the one case I considered, but in all the cases what you're going to realize is that the distance between d1 and d3 is either increasing by 3 or it is decreasing by 3. So what I want to say here is that if the distance between d1 and d2, that is the absolute value of d1 minus d2, if it is divisible by 3, then obviously your answer will be 0, because your answer will be 0 because you can make a1 plus a3 is equals to 2a2. That is, you can make d1 is equals to d2. Otherwise, what happens is that it keeps on changing by amounts of 3. So you can always bring it down to 1, because if you are bringing it down to 3, then you can bring it down to 0. If you are bringing it down to 2, then you can just do another operation and then it will become minus 1, which is just 1. The absolute value will be 1. And similarly, if you are bringing it down to 1, then you are good. So the observation here, final solution would be, if the difference between d1 and d2 is divisible by 3, then answer is equals to 0, otherwise answer is equals to 1, right? So I hope this was clear enough, and that is it for the solution for problem A. Let's just look at the code. Again, really easy. You just take all these numbers in an array, sort that array, and find out d1 and d2, then calculate the distance between them, and if that is divisible by 3, your answer is 0, otherwise it is 1. Alright, great. So this is the complete solution for problem A. Moving on to problem B now. This is called reverse sort. Again, a very justifiable problem for a div2b. So let's see what this problem has to say. So we have a binary string of length n, and what we want to do is we want to sort it in non-decreasing order. And here the operation that we are allowed to perform any number of times is that we can choose any particular subsequence of the string and just reverse it. So we are allowed to do this operation as many times as possible. And finally, we need to sort this array by using the minimum number of operations. So as an output, we need to print the minimum number of operations that we need to perform, as well as what exactly the operations are. So we have to print the number of elements in the subsequence which I am taking and all the indices of the subsequence. So yeah, this is the problem. Let's try to make some observations here. So we are at problem B now. So here, what we want to do is we want to sort this array in non-decreasing order. So one thing that we know is the final state of the array is going to be something like this: 0 0 0 1 1 1 1 1, right? And the initial array might not be this. So we need to somehow do some number of operations and reach this state from our initial state. Okay, that's great. So let's just assume that the number of zeros in our array is C0 and the number of ones is C1. So the number of zeros is C0 and the number of ones is C1. Alright, now let us assume that we have an arbitrary strings of 1s and 0. We have an arbitrary string consisting of some zeros, then some ones, then 0 1 0 1, and so on and so forth, right? So this is an arbitrary string that I have, and I want to do some number of operations on it so that the final state of the string becomes this. So before doing that, I would write the observation and then try to prove it. So the observation here is that it can always be done in a single operation. So this is the observation here, and let's try to see why that is the case. So we have a string like this, and let's say that the number of zeros here is C0 and the number of ones here is C1. So we look at the first C0 values and the last C1 values separately. So these are the first C0 values and these are the first C1 values. These are the last C1 values. So obviously now any 0 which is present in the first C0 value is already in its correct position. So we don't need to alter it anymore. So what we are interested in is a 1 which is present in the first C0 position. So let there be x ones in the let there be x ones in the first C0 positions in the prefix of length C1. C0, sorry. So in the prefix of length C0, let there be x ones. That means there are C0 minus x zeros. But we know that the total number of zeros is C0. So that means that there are exactly x zeros in the suffix, right? So what I'm trying to say is, if there are x ones in this particular region, then that means there are x zeros in this particular region. Why? Because if there are x ones in the first region, then there are C0 minus x zeros, and I know that the total number of zeros is C0, so there has to be x zeros here. So that means, so let's say that this is region 1 and this is region 2. So what I have actually proved is that for every 1 in region 1, there is a 0 in region 2, and that is simply because there are x ones in region 1 and there are x zeros in region 2. So that means for every 1 in region 1, I can match it with a 0 in region 2. So what I'm going to do is, my final substring, final subsequence that I will take, that will just consist of all the ones in the first region and all the zeros in the second region, because if I just reverse them, then the first region will contain all zeros and the second region will contain all ones. So in the final subsequence, I will take all ones in region 1 and all twos in region 2. By doing that, the entire region 1 will contain of just zeros and the entire region 2 will contain just ones, and the final string will be 0 0 0 0 0 1 1 1 1 1, which is sorted in non-decreasing order, which is what we finally want. So this is the complete solution for problem B. Let's just have a look at the code. So an easy way to think about it is that any element which is not already in its correct position has to be taken into the subsequence, and any element which is already in the correct position need not be touched. And in this way, we can achieve our goal in just a maximum of one operation. So what I'm doing here is that if the position is not already correct for an element, I'm pushing it into my answer vector. And if the size of my answer vector is 0, then the answer would just be 0. Otherwise, the answer would be 1, and I will output all the elements in my answer vector, and that would do the job for me. So this is it for problem B. Let's move on to the next problem now. Okay, so in problem C, we have dominant character, and this is actually one of those problems which requires some keen observation skills. Like, you don't need to be really good at some algorithms or something. You just have to be good at making quick observations, and if you can do that, you will be able to solve these problems really quickly, and that actually gives you an edge, because most of the rounds depend on your speed a lot. So yeah, it's really important to have good observation skills. Let's try to see what this problem has to say now. So we have a string which consists of only A, B and C's, and what we want to do is we want to find the length of the smallest substring which satisfies some conditions. And these conditions are that the length of the substring has to be at least 2, and the number of occurrences of A in the substring has to be strictly greater than those of B, and the number of occurrences of A have to be strictly greater than those of C. And yeah, this is the entire problem. Finally, we need to tell the length of the smallest substring which satisfies these conditions. And obviously this first condition is there because if there is an A, then that would obviously be the answer. So to avoid that, they have given the condition that the length of the substring should be at least 2. Right, so let's try to make some observations as always and try to solve this problem. Okay. So as I said, this is a problem which requires us to make some observations. So we'll try to tackle this problem case by case. So let's look at the first case. So the first case is that there exists a substring which is of the form AA. Now this case is pretty trivial because if there is a substring of the type AA, then it is obviously good because it satisfies all the three conditions. There are no B's and C's involved, so the last two conditions are already satisfied and the length is greater than 2, so the first condition is also satisfied. So in this case I can say that the answer will always be 2. Now with this case done, the second case comes, which now I am sure that there is no AA in my string, right? So that is one thing. And yeah, so now this case is done, and before that I have a pre-case, which is that number of A's is less than 2. If that is the case, then obviously the answer will always be -1, because there is no particular substring which can satisfy the condition, since I can have just one A here and the length of the substring has to be at least 2. So obviously if I have just one A, that condition will never be satisfied. So I am assuming from now on that the string has at least 2 A's. So yeah, the case 1 is that there exists a substring of the form AA for which the answer will always be 2. Now with that done, I know that there is no string AA. So there are no contiguous occurrences of 2 A's together. So naturally, one thing which I want to look at is that there can be some A and something in between that and another A. So this can be either ABA or ACA. Again, you can say that in both these cases, the string is good enough, ABA or ACA, that particular substring is good enough because it satisfies all the three conditions. The number of occurrences of A is 2 and that of B is 1 and C is 0. So 2 is greater than 1 and 2 is greater than 0. So I can safely say that the answer here is going to be 3 always. Okay. So now with these two cases done, I am pretty sure that for any two consecutive occurrences of A, there are at least 2 characters in between, right? So that is one thing. Now let's say that the case 3 is that there exists something like this, A dash dash A. Now this is a tricky case. This is a pretty tricky case to handle, and the reason for that is that there are really 2 cases here, 2 sub cases here. So the subcase 1 here would be that the element which is present, the 2 elements which are present in between the 2 A's are same, and subcase 2 is that when both of these elements are different. So in this case I will get something like this, ABBA or ACCA, and the subcase 2 is, so the subcase 2 is that both the elements in between the 2 A's are different. In that case, I will get something like this, ABCA or ACBA. Now, when I'm in subcase 2, I know that this string ABCA and ACBA, both of them are fine because the number of occurrences of A is 2 and that of both B and C is 1. So 2 is obviously greater than 1 and the first condition is already satisfied. So here I can safely say that the answer is going to be 4 always. That is good. But here it's a bit tricky because I have ABBA and ACCA, and the number of occurrences here of A and B are 2 and here of A and C are 2, and clearly both of them are not good for me because they don't satisfy the second and the third conditions. Like one of them doesn't satisfy the second condition and the other doesn't satisfy the third condition. So I need to think about something else here, and one thing which I want to know here is that what happens if I have 2 substrings like this, A dash dash A, then again dash dash A. I already know that both the elements here are same. So let's say that I have ABBA here. Now again I know that these 2 elements are also same because if they were not, I would have been in subcase 2 and my answer would have been 4, right? But if these 2 elements are also same, then there are really 2 other cases. They can either be BBA or CCA, right? So I can either have something like this or I can have something like this, ABB, ACCA. And clearly here I can see that this first substring is bad for me and this second substring is good because the number of occurrences of A here are 3 and those of B and C are just 2. So if I just take this case, my answer would be 7. And it is easy to see that in any other case there will be no answer possible, because if there are more than 3 elements between any two a's, then obviously I will have a situation like this: a x x x a, then again something like this, then again something like this. And here I can pretty easily see whatever substring I take, the number of occurrences of a would be smaller than those of b and c. They would be smaller than either b and or c. So it is pretty clear that if all the occurrences of a are greater than equals to 3 apart, then the answer would never exist. So I have to assume that all the occurrences of a have to be less than or equals to 2 apart, and this justifies that I have considered all the possible cases where an answer can exist. And one thing that I note here is that the length of a good substring is never exceeding 7, right? So the easy way to solve this problem is to just iterate on all the substrings of length up to 7 and do a brute force, because now I pretty much know that the length of the best substring would never exceed 7. So what I can do is I can just iterate on all the substrings of length from 1 to 7 and check whether they are good or not, and out of all the good substrings just simply take the minimum length one, and that would be my answer. So let's just have a look at the code. This completes the solution to this problem. Okay, so what you can see here is that I am just iterating from 0 to n minus 1, and my j is going from I to I plus 8, and then I am just calculating the number of a's, b's and c's. And if it is good, that is if C1 is greater than C2 and C1 is greater than C3, then my answer, then that would be a good substring, so I can consider it to be an answer, and I can do answer is equals to minimum of that and j minus I plus 1, which is just the length of my current substring. And finally, if there is no particular substring, then my answer has been initialized to infinity. So if it is infinity, then the answer has to be minus 1, and I will just output my answer. So yeah, that is pretty much it for problem C. Again, you have to be good in your observation skills to solve this problem quickly, and that will surely give you an edge over others. So that is it for problem C. Moving on to the last problem that we'll be discussing today, which is called tree labeling. Now this is a really elegant and beautiful problem. I could not solve it during the contest, but when I actually thought of the solution, it was like really beautiful. So let's see what this problem has to say. Now we have a tree, and a game is being played by 2 players on a tree. There are n nodes and n minus 1 edges, obviously. So we have a token, and the first player in the first move places the token on a particular node, and consequently the players take alternative turns to move the token to any of the adjacent nodes which has not yet been visited. So that is one thing. There are actually 3 conditions that a player has to satisfy while taking any move. So in the first move, the first player just keeps the token on an arbitrary node of his choice, and thereafter all the moves have to satisfy these 3 conditions. So the first condition is that if I'm at a particular node U and I want to transfer my token at another node V, then there are 3 conditions that V should satisfy. The first is that U should be adjacent to V, and the second is that the node U has not been visited before, and the third is that the bitwise OR of U and V is less than or equals to the minimum of U and V. So these are the 3 conditions that I have to satisfy. And finally, as always in any game problem, the player who cannot make a move will lose the game. But this is not it. This is not the final problem. The final problem is like this, that before the game begins, what we can do is we can actually relabel all the elements of the array, all the elements of the tree. So if we have a tree structure like this, we can just replace any number with any other number, making sure that we are taking into account all the numbers. And yeah, so basically we have to replace all the numbers from 1 to n by a permutation. A permutation is a sequence from 1 to n where all the numbers occur exactly once. So yeah, you get what I'm trying to say. You can reorder all the elements of the tree, and that is something you can do. But your final goal is that while you reorder all the elements of the tree, the condition should be that you have to reorder it in such a way that whichever starting node you pick, it is highly probable that the first player is going to win. And what I mean by that is I want to maximize the number of nodes that will guarantee a win for player 1. So that is my final goal here. So I will just repeat what I have to do here. I have to reorder all the elements of the tree. That is, I can reorder 1 to 2, I can reorder 2 to 5 or anything like that. That is in my hands. I have to reorder all the elements of the tree such that the number of nodes which guarantee a win for the first person are maximized. So that is the final goal here. And finally, I have to output that permutation. So yeah, this is pretty much the problem. Let's try to break it down and solve it. So problem D. So first of all, we are going to tackle the condition, the third condition which is given to us, which is that the bitwise OR of u and v is less than equals to minimum of u comma v. Now let's try to break this condition down and let's try to see what this condition actually implies. And obviously, if we are talking about bitwise ORs, it makes sense to write u and v in their binary representations. So let's say I have a binary representation of u like this and a binary representation of v like this. Something like this, right? So here what you notice is that in the bitwise OR of u and v, what you're going to notice is that this particular bit, all these bits are obviously going to be 0 because they are 0 in both u and v. But this bit is also going to be 0, which is the most significant bit, right? And if the most significant bit is 0, then obviously what I can say is that, let's say x is the XOR, then x here will be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 and something else. But once I know that this is a 0, then I know that this x will be smaller than u and v, right? But if I had a situation like this where my u is like something of this sort and v is something of this sort, then what I notice is that this particular bit in x would be set something after this. So in this situation, what I realize is that x would be greater than v. Why? Because there is a bit to the left of this particular bit in x which is active, which just means that x is greater than v. So what I have essentially proved here is that the condition for this u or v to be less than equals to minimum of u comma v is that both u and v should have the same leftmost active bit, which is also sometimes called the most significant bit, or simply MSB, right? So I have essentially proved that if the MSB of u and v is the same, then their bitwise OR would be less than equals to both of them. But if the MSB of u and v is different, then the MSB of the bitwise OR would just be the MSB of maximum of u and v. So it will be greater than minimum of u and v, right? So that is something which will be very, very important to solve this problem. So this is the first step done. We have actually broken down the condition of u or v to be less than equals to minimum of u comma v. Now we know that we can move from any u to any v if both u and v have the same leftmost active bit or they have the same MSB. Great. Now my final goal is to maximize the number of wins of player 1. And remember that in the first turn, the player 1 just takes the token and puts it on an arbitrary node, and there are no restrictions to put it whatsoever. So I am free to put my token anywhere on any particular node. But what if from that particular node I cannot move anywhere? Then obviously my player 1 has won, right? And now a question arises that what is this maximum number of nodes which guarantee the win of player 1? And it turns out that it is always possible to have an arrangement such that all the nodes guarantee the win of player 1. That is it. That is the problem. The thing is that it is always possible to have a permutation to rearrange all the elements of the tree in such a way that no, it doesn't matter on which of the nodes my player 1 puts the token, he is always going to win. And it turns out that it will not just guarantee his win, it will guarantee the win in 0 moves. That is, I will just keep the token on any node and I will make sure that my second player can't do anything. That is, there are no moves left for the second player. So essentially, what I'm claiming here is that no matter where I keep the token, for example, I keep the token on a node I, then there will be no node adjacent to it such that the bitwise OR of I and j is less than equals to minimum of I and j. So my claim is there exists an arrangement of nodes such that for any I there is no j adjacent to it such that MSB of I and MSB of j are the same, right? So this is what I want. Now this is a claim, obviously I have to prove this somehow. And one thing which always comes to people's mind when they are talking about edges and something being similar on both ends of the edges is a property of graphs called bipartiteness. And what we know is that a tree is always a bipartite graph. A bipartite graph is something is a graph where every node can be colored either in color 1 or in color 2, and finally there will be no edge such that it has one node of color 1 and one node of color 2. I mean, a bipartite graph is a graph where after coloring all the nodes 1 and 2, all the edges are between a node colored 1 and colored 2. So there is no node which has two edges of the same color. That is basically what a bipartite graph is. And a tree is obviously a bipartite graph because if you notice, there are levels in a tree, there are nodes in odd levels and there are nodes in even levels. And I know that any edge in a tree is always between a node at even level and a node at odd level. So we can just color all the nodes at even levels with one color and all the nodes at odd level with the other color, and that will just guarantee that the tree is bipartite. So I know that the tree is always bipartite. So that is one observation. So let's say I color the nodes of the tree with colors white and black, and the number of nodes which I color white is W and the number of nodes which I colored black is B. So what I'm trying to say here is that the number of nodes on the even level are W and the number of nodes on the odd level are B. They can be interchanged, but without loss of generality, I can say that I'm coloring the nodes which are at even level to be white and the nodes which are at odd level to be black. So yeah, I have W nodes which are at even level and B nodes which are at white level, and without loss of generality I can always assume that W is less than or equals to B, because if that is not the case I can just swap W and B. Okay, now also one thing which I know is that W plus B is obviously equals to N. So if W plus B is equals to N and W is less than equals to B, I can obviously say that W is less than or equals to N by 2. So W is less than or equals to N by 2. That I very well know. Okay, so I have established this. Now let's look at the structure of the tree a little bit and also the nodes. So the nodes which I have are all the way from 1 to N, right? Okay, and since we are talking about the MSBs, it makes sense to write down the MSBs. I know that for 1 the MSB is 0, for 2 it is 1, for 3 it is 1, for 4, 5, 6, 7 it is 2, and then it is 3 for the remaining elements, and so on and so forth, right? So what you notice is that the number of nodes which have MSB equals to 0 is 1, the number of nodes which have MSB equals to 1 is 2, that is 2 and 3, and the number of nodes which have MSB equals to 2 are 4, which is 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on and so forth. So what you notice is that number of nodes having MSB equals to I is 2 raised to the power I, right? For 1 it is, for 0 it is 1, for 1 it is 2, for 2 it is 4, so on and so forth. So that is one thing, but this observation is not true for possibly the last bit. Why? Because let's say that n is equals to 20. So then I will have something like this: 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So let's say I have a situation like this. So in this case, what I'm trying to say is that right, so this is what the structure of my MSB looks like, and here 0, for 0 I have 1, for 1 I have 2, for 2 I have 4, for 3 I have 8, but for 4 obviously there is a limit, right? Because I'm not going all the way till the next power of 2, and I mean I'm not going all the way till 31. If I were going till 31, then the number of 4s would have been 16, which is what I want, but I'm not doing that. I'm just going till 20. That is why, except possibly the last bit, that is, except possibly the highest bit of n, which is nothing but the MSB of n, right? So except possibly for the MSB of n, I know that for all the other values of I, the number of nodes having MSB is equals to I is 2 raised to the power I. Okay, so with this done, now let's come back to the observation which we made earlier, that is that W is less than or equals to n by 2. Now, since W is less than or equals to n by 2, I know that the MSB of n is not set in W, and that is simply because 2 times W is less than or equals to n, right? And obviously if 2 times W is less than or equals to n, the MSB of n is greater than the MSB of W. This means that MSB of n is strictly greater than the MSB of W. Now this obviously requires a little bit knowledge of binary representation of numbers to make this particular observations. So if you are not able to understand why the MSB of n is not equal to the MSB of W, you have to learn a little bit more about binary numbers and how they work. But I will assume that you can understand why the MSB of n and W would be different, and that of n would be strictly greater, because twice of W is less than or equals to n. So there obviously has to be a difference in the MSBs. Great. And according to my previous observation, for all I from 0 to MSB of n minus 1, I know that there are exactly 2 raised to the power I nodes which have MSB equals to I, right? So what happens here is that for every I which is set in W, I have exactly 2 raised to the power I nodes which have MSB equals to I. And that is the most crucial observation in this problem. And now I can say that the sum of all I, the sum of 2 raised to the power I, so let me write it down, the sum of 2 raised to the power I for all I which are set in W, it turns out it is equals to what? W, right? Because that's how binary representations work. The sum of 2 raised to the power I for all values of I which are set in a particular number just gives us that number in the decimal form, right? So I know that if the number of numbers having MSB equals to I for all I which are set in W is equals to 2 raised to the power I, and that just solves the problem, because now what I can do is that color all the nodes having MSB as a set bit in W to be white, and color all other nodes black. And this is the reason that there are multiple answers possible, because it is my wish how I want to color, but the only thing which I need to satisfy is that I have to color all the nodes whose MSB is a set bit in W to be white and all the other nodes as black. And the reason for that is that for all I for which the ith bit in W is set, I have exactly 2 raised to the power I numbers, and that is good because the summation of 2 raised to the power I for all I which are set in my current number, which is W, is just W, and that is how binary representations work. So yeah, because all these numbers sum up to W, I can just put them in, I can just color them white, and I can color all the other numbers black, and that would satisfy that all the numbers which have MSBs which are set in W to be on even levels and all the other numbers to be on odd levels, and that would just satisfy that any edge which is between even levels and odd levels is between two numbers which have different MSBs. And that is how I can guarantee that it doesn't matter on which node I put the token, the first player is always going to win. Right, so this completes the solution to problem D, and this was a really beautiful problem. Breaking it down and case by case doing it was like really fun for me. So let's just have a look at the code for understanding it to the core. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating an adjacency list, and I'm creating a 2D vector where I'm storing all the elements which are at even levels and all the elements which are at odd levels. So that can be done using a DFS. I'm passing the parameter of level in my DFS, and I just do that using a simple DFS. So when I have these MP of 0 and MP of 1 with me, what I can do is, obviously if the size of MP of 0 is greater than that of MP of 1, I have the liberty to swap them, so I'm just going to do that. Now my Mn is minimum of size of MP of 0 and size of MP of 1, but I'm making sure that that minimum is just 0, so I can safely say that Mn is equals to the size of MP of 0. And I have a answer vector, which is what the problem wants as an output. And now what I'm doing here is that I'm using this beautiful function in C++ called built-in CLZ. This is a very useful function. Using this one line, I can just simply find the MSB, and that too really fast. So this is basically a line using which I can find the MSB of any number. Now if that MSB is set in minimum, I am painting it white. That is, I'm putting a white element, I'm putting an element which is in 0 level, and the answer of that element is just I, and then I'm popping back from the vector of even length elements, even level elements. And if the bit is not set in Mn, then I'm just taking out an element from odd level and painting it to be black, right? So finally I just output all the elements, the answer value of all the elements, and get done with it. So this concludes the solution for problem D, and that is all I had for today. I hope you guys got to learn something new, and I will see you in the next contest. Bye bye.